Hello, and welcome back to the Lost Caverns of Ixalan set review. Today I'm going to be talking about the cards without having played with them. I haven't played with them. I'm just going to be talking about how I think good I think they're going to be in Limited. Specifically, don't play Constructed at all, so, if that's what you're looking for, this is not the place for you. But if you are a Limited enjoyer, feel free to check this one out. I will be rating the cards based on these tiers. Tier 1, of course, is the best, the top end, and Tier 5 is the worst. If you want a better description of kind of what the tiers mean or are supposed to mean, that's, it's here. Um, but it's somewhat like once you to see it once, it's pretty easy to understand. And we're just going to get right into it here with Armored Kin Caller. 2 and a green for a 3/3. When it enters the battlefield, you may reveal a dinosaur card from your hand. If you do, or if you control another dinosaur, you gain 3 life. Yeah, this is just solid. I mean, in many scenarios, you're going to be gaining 3. If you're not gaining 3, it's pretty not great. But there's only so much you can ask for, right? It is a dinosaur. There's some tribe stuff, but I mean, you're going to play it. I don't think this is going to be like an every deck thing. You do kind of need like a decent, like, you probably want some other dinosaurs, but it doesn't have to trigger every time to be like amazing. It just is sort of fine, and sometimes you want it and sometimes you don't, right? Not a high synergy card, but just sort of a card that like sort of exists and is playable. Basking Capybara, 1 and a green for a 1/3 with Descend 4. So it gets +3/+0 as long as you control, as long as there are 4 more permanent cards in your graveyard. So the Descend stuff, I think it's really important to be able to enable this. But this, if you're playing like a slow, if your whole plan is to do like mill stuff, I think this card could be decent because you play it on 2, and it like can block, and then if you have a good Descend deck, you're gonna have Descend 4 on by like turn 5 to turn 6, somewhere between turn 5 and turn 6, and then this is a 4/3, and like it's pretty good. That's a real creature in the middle part of the game, and you still had the benefit of having something to play on turn 2. So I think that's fine, and obviously it's not great in like super if you're trying to be like very aggressive. Um, but yeah, I think if you're playing a more mid-range game, I think this can totally be serviceable, and I have some expectations that it will be making the cut a decent percentage of the time. Bedrock Tortoise. 3 and a green for an 0/6. As long as it's your turn, creatures you control have hexproof. Each creature you control with toughness greater than its power assigns combat damage equal to its toughness rather than its power. Yeah, originally I had this a little lower than tier 1, but I mean, 4 mana 6/6, right? It's not that great, but it does make your creatures, like, it's just the largeness of the creature does warrant some inherent value. And it also applies immediately. So if you were to play like that 2 mana 1/3 there, it becomes a 3/3, like just after playing this. And if you just have like just anything with toughness greater than its power, there's usually a reason why those cards like have toughness greater than their power, and it's because they usually have like decent abilities and stuff. So I don't know, just making your creatures better, and it does it all immediately. This might be a little too aggressive on the grade, to be honest. It might end up just being kind of a tier 2, whatever. Like, it's good, but nothing amazing, type deal. But I think it'll sneak into tier 1. I think it'll win a decent percentage of games, just because it's so large. Similar to the like 3 mana 4/4. You know what I mean? From 1. This will be, I think, similarly just kind of like, oh, you made a large thing that is now going to attack me. So I don't know. I like this card. Cavern Stompa. 4 green for a 7/7. When it enters the battlefield, scry 2. You can pay 4 mana, 3 and a green, and it can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less this turn. Yep, I mean, it's pretty large. It's a 6 mana 7/7. Like, that's big, but it does scry 2. Like, honestly, I think it's generous to put this in tier 3, given the amount of mana it costs to play it. There is some ramp themes, like there's going to be some ramp capabilities, so maybe you can play this, and it's your ramp target, but as we found out last set, even Hamlet Glutton wasn't really good enough to survive the end of the format. That card ended up actually falling down quite a bit. Ended up being not even a card that I was interested in getting me into green by the later stages of Wilds of Eldraine. So I think this card is probably better on average, probably better on average than Hamlet Glutton. I don't know. It's somewhat close, but I do think it's gonna be playable, but nothing spectacular. C-Note Scout. Single green mana for a 1/1. When it enters the battlefield, it explores. So really nice, right? Like either you get to draw a card, like 1 mana 1/1 draw a card. That's a really good card. Or 1 mana 2/2, and you can put something in your graveyard if you want. So that's also a pretty good card. So yeah, both of those rates are really strong, and this card is just strong generally. Not really much more to ask for. Coati Scavenger. I don't know. There's like 3 different ways you could pronounce that first word. 2 and a green for a 3/2 with Descend 4. When it enters the battlefield, if there are 4 or more permanent cards in your graveyard, you return target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. Yeah, I mean this is just a really strong like middle game card. It does have, again, it requires some enabling, so these cards are going to be less important than like the mill enablers for them. But I do think this can do something in the mid game. You don't really want to play it on 3. It isn't a complete nightmare, but like the real mana value of this card is like 6. Kind of, you play it on 6 and you get something back, and then play the thing you get back, and it's like kind of okay. Yeah. Colossadactyl. 2 green for a 4/5 reach trample. I have put this in tier 3 and not tier 2 because I'm making a statement about vanilla creatures generally. But it is highly possible that this is just a tier 2 card because the stats are high enough. Like, they don't generally print like large green dudes anymore. Like, they don't just do that. Because they typically aren't very good. This one has 2 keywords that do matter. They don't necessarily play the best like together, but they do. Like, green does struggle with flyers, and trample is nice, kind of. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how far vanilla gets you these days. The 4 mana 4/4 reach at common in Dominaria United was like a fine card. That was like a tier 3 card, maybe a tier 4. It was sort of between tier 3 and tier 4 card in that set, and I would say this is firmly at least tier 3 would be my view on it, and maybe it'll end up bumping up, but and it is a dinosaur, it has types, so there's that, but not super excited. Cosmium Confluence. 4 and a green for a sorcery, choose 3, you may choose the same mode more than once. Search the library for a cave card, put that onto the battlefield, tap and shuffle. Put 3+1/+1 counters on a cave you control, it becomes a 0/0 elemental with haste, it's still a land, and you can destroy target enchantment. So, I have this in tier 1. Obviously, that's with the caveat that if you don't have caves in your deck, this doesn't do anything. So, like, you do need to have caves in the deck. And if you don't, but there are a lot of caves. There's common caves, uncommon caves, there's rare caves, all kinds of caves. There are even caves that like some of the rares transform into caves. Like, I don't know. There's going to be caves, and I think there's going to be enough caves around that you're going to want this. And enchantments do exist. I probably should move this to tier 2 actually. I think this 2 run is probably a little too high. You know what? We are gonna do that. By the power of editing, it's been moved to tier 2. Yeah, I mean, the reason I was like, wait a minute, tier 1's too much for this. Like, because again, at the end of the day, like, it is kind of just like you can find your caves and then put. I got really excited. I am very anti like cave. I do think the caves are going to be kind of bad, but this card seems like a certainly playable enabler for the cave stuff. And you are going to just want the caves normally. I think they are tap lands, and we saw how dangerous the foibles of tap lands can be in All-Be-One. Those lands were really bad. And these lands, these caves, which we'll get to at a later point, they concern me. They definitely are concerning. I'm not just all in being like, oh, I'm gonna stake my entire reputation saying the caves are just the best cards ever, because I don't think that's the case. But the versatility here, I think, is going to be enough to put it into tier 2 for me. Disturbed Slumber. 1 and a green for an instant until end of turn. Target land you control becomes a 4/4 dinosaur creature with reach and haste. It's still a land, it must be blocked to this turn of Fable. They printed this style of card a number of times. It has never been good. It's basically 3 mana. 3 mana tricks aren't good. Yeah, I don't know. At some point they'll like basically this card stays in this type of card will stay in tier 5 until they print one that actually is functional, and then I'll move it up. But until that day happens, this type of card will remain in the bottom tier. Earthshaker Dreadmaw, 4 green, green for a 6/6 trample. When it enters the battlefield, draw a card for each other dinosaur you control. Um, Again, I don't really think like there's some dinosaurs roaming around. There are some common and uncommon ones, so it's not like completely out of the question that you could have this be decent, and that's why I put it in tier 3. Um, like if you have one other dinosaur, this is a good card. But like if they just printed 6 mana 6/6 trample draw card, that's not actually that far off. Like Owlbear was what? 5 mana 4/4 draw card. And that was a good card, but it wasn't like busted or anything. So if they printed like a 6 mana 5/5 draw like trample draw card, that would be sort of on rate. So it's like you're getting an extra +1/+1 if you have a dinosaur. And like you can get more than that, but I don't realistically think you're going to be doing that very often. Um, yeah, I mean it's fine. So that's kind of why I have it here. Is I'm like you have to enable it, and the dino stuff I'm not a huge believer in. Basically, Explorer's Cache. 1 and a green for an artifact that enters the battlefield with 2 +1/+1 counters on it. Whenever a creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it dies, put a +1/+1 counter on Explorer's Cache, and you can tap to move a +1/+1 counter from the cache onto a creature, activate only as a sorcery. So this is not my type of card. I don't really like this style of card. I find this style of card to be very bad. And what do I mean by style of card? Well, it's a 2 mana play that doesn't directly impact the board by itself and needs other creatures to function, and can get blown out by the opponent's removal, and is pretty low impact. And like, sure, you can craft it and do other stuff later in the game, but and like, yes, you get the counters back, but only if it dies. Like if it gets like enchanted or exile removed or some other thing, which happens a decent percentage of the time, or like you're just stuck. And again, not impacting the board on turn 2 is really bad. So this is really more like when I see a 2 mana spell that doesn't impact the board, what I think about is I'm like, well, it's probably more like a half of a 4 mana spell. So like when you have cards like this, you need to have like even more 2 mana spells to be able to justify having a card like this in your deck. And then your deck gets a little bit more like, well, do I run out of cards, right? Do I have too much cheap stuff because instead of having just a 4 mana spell, I have this, and I have to play this and another 2-drop on 4. And like that's kind of like this card's best case scenario. Well, the best case scenario is you have a 1-drop and then play this, and then it's like kind of fine, but like you just don't have 1-drops consistently enough and limited for that to be like a thing you can be relying on. Unless you're super all in, and even then, like this card is just worse than playing like a 2/2, because like you could just follow up your 1/1 drop with a 2-drop, and then you have like 2 things to like use stuff with. So I don't know. I'm pretty off this card. Again, need to see it to believe it. Galta Stampede Tyrant. 5 green, green, green for a 12/12. When it enters the battlefield, put any number of creature cards from your hand onto the battlefield. I mean, 8 mana 12/12 trample is pretty big. So yeah, that's basically what this is. It's an 8 mana 12/12 trample, which is, I think playable, but nothing special. It doesn't immediately impact the board. It's just really large, and it is like you can like 8 mana. It's not like completely undoable, but it's like again, if you untap with this, you probably just win because you get to attack for 12, and your opponent's like, well, I have to block 12 trample damage, and now I'm probably dead. And that happens a decent amount of the time. Like, there's not a whole lot of removal spells that will just, like, kill this immediately. There's, enchantment removal, and there's, black removal, and there's not even, like, that much black card removal that kills this. So, the bounce spells are pretty good in blue, but, just not a ton. So, I certainly think it's fine. Glimpse the Core. 100 green for a sorcery. You can choose one. Search your library for a basic forest card, put that card onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. Or return target cave card from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. Again, I'm out on most of the cave stuff. This card is just 2 mana, like, explorer, kind of. 2 mana to ramp. Sure, I don't know. This card just does so little in the late game that I'm just not like I don't think it's good. I really don't think it's good. 2 mana ramp tends to be. I mean, this one at least draws you the card from your deck, but 2 mana ramp in limited like this type of things doesn't. Because if you don't play it exactly on turn 2, it's basically awful. So I don't know. I'm very off this type of card. Glowcap Lantern, single green mana for an equipment. Equipped creature has you may look at the top card of your library at any time, and when this creature attacks, it explores and equip for 2. Yep, I think this is too expensive. It does have some like, what's the card called? Reality chip vibes. Oh, I get to look at the top card, and then you get to explore, and like that's really good and whatever. I don't know. 2 mana to equip. If this were 1 mana to equip, I'd be like, maybe to have a little bit of interest, maybe I'd be slightly interested, but I'm not even slightly interested at all. So, yep. Growing Rights of Ilmatic. Okay, you know what? Whatever. I give up. 2 and a green for a legendary enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, look at the top 4 cards of your library and reveal a creature card from one of them and put it into your hand. Put the rest of them on the bottom of the library in any order. At the beginning of your end step, if you control 4 or more creatures, transform it into basically Gaia's Cradle. Although you can also tap to add green. Yeah, I mean this seems like okay. Like the problem is that in most decks you probably A don't want the land, and B you're not playing a creature on turn 3. So you're gonna have a hard time getting to 4 creatures if you didn't play a creature on turn 3. And then like once you have 4 creatures, you've played most of your creatures, and then you won't be able to actually transform it, and that would be like why you'd have it in your deck. I don't know. I'm not. The reason it's tier 4, not tier 5, is that it does give you some like, hey, look, I got back a creature that's like good in my deck, and I wanted to have it or whatever. But like if you have like something busted, maybe you can play this, and it's like, oh, it'll cast my like super huge thing, even though I don't know what I'm doing with all this mana. I don't know. Lot Hulati Hu Atle's Final Strike. That was pronounced correctly. 2 and a green for an instant. Target creature you control gets +1/+0 until end of turn. It deals damage equal to its power to target creature and opponent controls. We saw like the way better version of this that was double pipped in March of the Machine, and that card was pretty good. This card I still think is going to be okay. Like that card was like a tier 2 card. This card is going to be I think a bit tier worse than that card, but still fine. You know, nothing special. It's a bite spell. It's instant. You get +1/+0. I don't know. It might even be lower than that to BH. I'm kind of surprised they didn't make this 2 mana. might have been good if they did that. Wadi, Poet of Unity. Sure. Yep. When it enters the battlefield, search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, and put it in your hand. And then you can pay 3 and red and white hybrid to exile it and return it transformed as a saga. And the first chapter of the saga says create 2 3/3 dinosaur creature tokens. The remainder of the words on the saga do not matter because that is enough by itself. I'm not going to bother reading them because it genuinely doesn't matter. This is a tier 1 card. 3 mana, 2/3 draw a card, and then you can just pay 5 to like basically win if your opponent doesn't blow you out. Hulking Raptor. 2 green for a 5/3 ward 2. At the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, add green. So it is not the first turn that you have it. You have to wait an entire turn for this to be alive, but it does have ward, so it helps stay alive a little bit. The 3 toughness is concerning. I mean, there's a braid and other stuff in the set, dealing 3 damage and all that, so it certainly does have its foibles, but it's a solid card. And adding 2 mana, is still relevant at this stage of the game. It is still good. It is kind of just a big dumb thing that dies and doesn't really attack or block especially well. So just notable. In the Presence of Ages, 2 and a green for an instant. Reveal the top 4 cards of your library. You may put a creature card and/or a land card from among them into your hand. Put the rest in your graveyard. Nope. These type of effects have been printed before, and like you get a creature and a land, sure, like whatever. And yes, it's nice. Like if this revealed top 5, I would start to actually kind of be interested, like more in this, because again, getting stuff in your graveyard is really important, especially like permanents. Um, but yeah, because you want to have more permanents in your graveyard, playing instants actually just gets worse. Like instants and sorceries are kind of just like bad card types in this set because of Descend. So like you kind of want to be limited in the number of those that you're playing, and this doesn't help you there either. But like it again, it does like replace itself and whatnot, but nothing special. Intrepid Paleontologist. 1 and a green for a 2/2 to tap to add mana of any color, and you can also pay 2 to exile a card from your graveyard. You may cast dinosaur creature spells from among cards you own exiled with Intrepid Paleontologist. If you cast a spell this way, that creature enters the battlefield with a finality counter on it. So, cool card, 2 mana dork that allows you to also double for graveyard hate, or you can like on your opponent's turn, exile a thing from your graveyard and then cast it again. So that's really good. I think this is just a really solid card. And yeah. Ixali's Lore Keeper. Single green for a 1/1. Tap to add 1 mana of any color. Spend this mana only to cast a dinosaur spell or activate an ability of a dinosaur source. Not interested. Again, I don't believe in the dinosaur stuff. I think if you get every single one of the uncommons, maybe it can work, but I don't think there's enough common support for me to be thrilled about it. Again, it also only really goes in like red-green. Like red-green is the only deck that can really do this. So it's a really narrow card and just a really bad early pick in a draft, basically. Jade Seedstones. 3 and a green for an artifact. When it enters the battlefield, distribute 3+1/+1 counters among up to 3 creatures you control. And you can craft with a creature for 5 green and make a 7/7. And when it enters the battlefield, you gain life equal to the mana value of the exiled card used to cast it. Which is probably like 3 or 4. That's going to be your highest. Yeah, I mean, like, I like this card. The front side concerns me in terms of how bad the base rate is, but I mean, like, it is a lot of mana, but I had this a little lower, and then I've moved it up, and I could move it back down. I'm certainly not going to be picking this as highly as, like, I think the average person is to start, and so I'm probably not going to get to play with it for a bit, and then the data will come out, and I will determine whether or not I think it's good before I ever actually play with it. But I don't know. I think it's fine. It has upside. Jade Light Spelunka. X on a green for a 1/1. When it enters the battlefield, it explores X times. So Explorer, similar to Scry and Surveil, suffers when you do it multiple times consecutively. Because if you ever find something you want to keep on top, this just becomes a, X mana XX that drew you, that like put something that you wanted on top. And that is not a good card. But if you start drawing lands, you start drawing cards off of it, it becomes a good card. Like if you hit, like, you obviously just want to play, like if you're on, I guess the real question is on like turn 4, you probably just play this for 3, and that's where this is when this is actually good. I don't, like when you're paying, like if you're paying 6 for this, it doesn't really get that much better. Sure, you might find a couple extra lands, but your creature is a little smaller, and like, do you really care that much about drawing lands once you have 6 lands, right? It certainly has like you kind of want to play this the second you run out of lands. Like, say you hit your 4th land drop, you don't have any lands in hand, this is what you want. You play this, you find your next couple land drops, you keep hitting land drops, and this thing, draws you a couple cards. And put stuff in your graveyard, so it's nice, but I don't think it's busted or anything. Castellum's Stone Tree. 2 and a green for an artifact. When it enters the battlefield, look at the top 6 cards of your library. You may put a land card from among them onto the battlefield tapped, and put the rest on the bottom in a random order. And you craft with a cave to make a 5/5. This card is awful. Especially because you have to craft it with a cave. Like, honestly, like, could they not have just said, like, could they not have just made this interesting and be like, hey, throw the rest of the cards in your graveyard? Like, that would have been nice. This would actually maybe just do something if they did that, but they didn't do that. I don't know, man. Like, you get a land onto the battlefield tapped. Great. It's just so bad. It's 3 mana ramp and then you could maybe craft with like a cave to make a 5/5. Like no, 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 not at all. Malamet Battleglyph. Single green mana for a sorcery. Choose target creature you control and target creature you don't control. If the creature you control enter the battlefield this turn, put a +1/+1 counter on it, then those creatures fight each other. 1 mana fight spell. I haven't seen this. I don't think. I mean, there's Bushwhack and whatnot, so with more versatility. But this is just a solid card. You know, nothing special. Solid. You know, you are gonna want to use it on a creature that you played this turn, but actually that ends up being the case with a lot with fight spells anyway. So probably decent. Malamet Brawler. 1 and a green for a 2/2. When it attacks, target attacking creature gains trample until end of turn. Not super thrilled with this. I don't really understand why this isn't a dinosaur, to be honest. Like, you really just could have given it a relevant type and you chose not to. I couldn't tell you why. Just really would make it a lot better if you had done that. Like, a 2-drop dinosaur is just so good. Like, it's so much like more important than, like, you know, this being a cat warrior. I don't know. It's still not a good card. I'm just not super. But it is a 2-drop. You can always play 2-drops. Like it's very hard for a 2-drop to be tier 5 because it's a 2-drop, and you can sometimes you just need 2-drops. So it is what it is. Malamet Scythe, 2 and a green for an equipment with flash. When it enters the battlefield, target attached to target creature you control. Equipped creature gets +2/+2, and you can equip for 4. I'm about to go on a bit of a rant here. Why on God's earth does this cost 4 to equip? I understand that you're getting a free equipment up front. However, that does not you could make this equip 2 and it would still be bad. It would still be a bad card. It still wouldn't be good. It would still be unplayable. And instead, here we are making this a equip 4. It's double the amount of equip cost that I am even like not even willing to pay half. Like I just don't understand. What am I not seeing here? Like, what am I not getting with this design? Like, they've done this design like a million times where they're like, oh, you get an equipment with flash and you get to equip it immediately, but then the equip cost is really expensive and nobody plays the cards ever. Nobody ever plays the cards. They're always awful. They're terrible. They're a waste of design space. I don't get it. I don't understand. I simply don't understand why they keep printing cards like this. Yes, it's +2/+2. That is better than the ones previously. Would you play 3? Would you like, basically what you're asking me to pay for is 3 mana enchantment, creature gets +2/+2 with flash. Is that a good card? No, it is not. That is a very, very bad card. Oh man, I don't know. You just can't. The problem with this is you can't ever hold up 3 mana. If you just can't. You can't hold 3 mana up. It's not. It's not doable. It just simply is not legal to hold up 3 mana for a trick in limited, and this card is not very good. Malamet Veteran, 4 and a green for a 5/4 with trample. Descend 4. When it attacks, if there are 4 more permanent cards in your graveyard, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. No interest. It is a 5 mana 5/4 with no ETB. It has trample. Great. Is Descend 4 likely to be active by the time this is attacking? Sure. But again, it has to attack. It's just going to sit there and be like, oh, I played a 5/4 for 5, and I didn't do anything else. That's it. And it's like, okay, great. Now your opponent removes it, and you lose instantly. I don't know, man. Like, why? Like, why? I don't understand. Like, why? Why? Mineshaft Spider. 3 and a green for a 3/4 with reach. When it enters the battlefield, you may mill 2 cards. I like this card. The reason I like this card is that it says mill 2 cards on it, and that's very, very important in this set. So basically, here's the joke, right? So the joke is all of these like type of enablers are really, really important, unless they just totally missed on Descend, which they very well could have because they just did it with Corrupted. They just did it and they missed. So if they did that again and they just totally missed, this card is awful and you shouldn't play it. And that's going to make the set terrible. If they missed on Descend 4 and Descend 8 and they should have been Descend 3 and Descend 6, nightmare. Set's a nightmare. Unplayably bad if they missed. I don't think that I have faith. I have faith that they didn't. However, if they missed, this card's going to be horrible and this set's going to be horrible because 4 mana 3/4 reach, no text is a bad card. So you really better have this mill work for you. But I do believe that mill is going to be important enough for enabling your payoffs that you are going to want it, and you are going to play this card. Nurturing Bristleback. 5 green for a 5/5. When it enters the battlefield, you create a 3/3 green dinosaur creature token, and it has 4 cycling for 2. Yeah, I mean, this is fine. I don't know. The cyclers, again, I'm not super thrilled about. I have them in tier 3, most of them. I don't love them. I don't hate them. I think they're probably better than the March of the Machine ones, but not by an enormous amount. And that's kind of my final take on them. Osier Kazlim, Deepest Growth. 5 mana for 3 green for a 6/5 trample. When it deals combat damage to a player, reveal that many cards from the top of your library. You may put a creature card or a land card from among them onto the battlefield. Put the rest on the bottom in a random order. When it dies, return transformed as this land that can tap for green mana, or you can pay 2 and a green and transform it, only if you control 10 or more permanents and it's a sorcery. Notably, when they transform back, they're tapped, so be advised. Yeah, this is kind of a vanilla-y dude, but it does get out of hand very quickly. I'm putting it in tier 2 because, again, like, it gets the tier, like, it gets attacks from being like, well, you have to untap. Ooh, what if I untap? You know, like, I'm not a huge fan of like the ooh, what if I untap? Then I get to do something type cards. But this one is pretty high impact and very difficult to block and trade with efficiently. So I think it's a pretty good card. Over the Edge. 1 and a green for a sorcery. Choose one, destroy target artifact or enchantment, or target creature you control explores, then it explores again. So this I actually like quite a bit. So when you think about it, like when I first saw this card, I was like, oh, one of these cards, it's garbage. But then I thought a little bit more. A, there's going to be tons of artifacts in this set, so you're going to probably have a target for this a decent amount of the time. And then B, Explorer. Maybe it draws you a card, maybe it draws you 2 cards, maybe it gives you 2+1/+1 counters. Is that an absolute nightmare? Not really. It kind of reminds me of the card from March of the Machine, the white card that like had the incubator token that was sort of like this. And it, you know, I think this actually might genuinely be better than that card, and that card was okay. So I like this card quite a bit. I don't think you want to like play a ton of them. Like I think that the second one gets a lot worse than the first one, but I think it's a totally playable card. Pathfinding Axejaw. 3 and a green for a 4/3. When it enters the battlefield, it explores. I think this is probably green's best common because it's so important for all of its decks. The exploration's good, the dinosaur's good, the 4/3 body's good. It really just does it all. So here you go. This is your reason to play green at common. Or also this one. This one's also pretty good. Poison Dart Frog. 1 and a green for a 1/1 with reach. You can tap to add 1 mana of any color, or you can pay 2 and it gains Death Touch until end of turn. Another really good card. Just really annoying, like, because in the late game, it's going to be tough to like fight through this, and in the early game it ramps you, so it kind of works on both ends of the spectrum of game states. There's also very good art, so there's that as well. Pugnacious Hammerskull. 2 and a green for a 6/6. When it attacks while you don't control another dinosaur, put a stun counter on it. I don't know. This card just seems busted. Whatever. Like, they printed it. Like, even if this just never like doesn't get a stun counter, whatever. I mean, it's a 3 mana 6/6. If you've ever played Hearthstone, it's similar to a 4 mana 7/7. So, be advised that this is going to be a 3 mana 6/6. It's going to be extremely difficult to remove. And if you have like, this is a good reason to put dinosaurs in your deck. It also is a good reason to just play it green. Because it doesn't matter if you have dinosaurs in your deck. Like, let's say you take 1 turn off. Okay, whatever. Your opponent had to either chump, or was it has now gone to like again. If you play this on curve, it's just an absolute monster because they can't ever block it without suffering severe material loss. And then, like, if you play a dinosaur after it, it's just a complete beating. River Herald Guide. 2 and a green for a 3/1 Vigilance. When it enters the battlefield, it explores. Yeah, I think this is solid, actually. Exploring is decent. Exploring's not bad. You know, 3 mana. Like, think of it as, like, what if this is a 3 mana? What if this card just said 3 mana, 4/2 Vigilance, Surveil 1? It wouldn't be great. So that's why I have it in tier 3. I'm like, yeah, I can block okay, but you really do want it to be drawing a card with the Explorer. If it draws you a land, it's great, basically. Seeker of Sunlight. Single green mana for a 1/1, and you can pay 2 and a green and it explores. Activate only as a sorcery. I hate these style of cards. They're never very good. This one, yeah, I don't really get it. I just don't get it. Doesn't seem good to me. So I'm gonna pass to start. Sentinel of the Nameless City. 2 and a green for a 3/4 with Vigilance. When it enters the battlefield or attacks, create a map token. Nice. Getting all these map, like this is, just making so many map tokens, and map tokens are great. So this seems great. Just seems like a good card to me. No issues there. Spelunking. 2 and a green for an enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, draw a card. Then you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. If you put a cave onto the battlefield this way, you gain 4 life. Lands you control enter the battlefield untapped. Again, the cave thing, I don't believe. And this one, again, is even worse because it doesn't impact the board in any way. Lands you control enter the battlefield untapped is kind of nice for some things, but, like, I don't know. It's 3 mana. Like, this is 3 mana, don't do anything, which scares me. Like, a lot of times, you don't get to draw, like, a lot of times you're just like, well, I hit my 4th land, and then I didn't draw land 5 by turn 4, so I just only still had 4 lands. So, it's kind of tough. Staggering Size. 1 and a green for an instant. Target creature gets +3/+3 and gains trample until end of turn. Yeah, I really like this actually. So it's a couple, a little bit shorter than Titanic Growth, but getting that trample is really big on tricks like this, where you're like, I'm gonna play green, I'm gonna play all these big dudes, I'm gonna smash through. A lot of the creatures have trample anyways, so there is that sort of tension where it's like, well, do I really need to have trample? Like, would I rather have Titanic Growth? But in the middle of the game, usually it's nice to just have access to, like, hey, I dealt like 4 extra damage to my opponent, and I killed their creature. So this is also just gonna find some lethal sometimes, where it's just like I chumped and then they just die. So there is that as well. Tendril of the Myco Tyrant. 1 and a green for a 2/2, and you can pay 7 mana, 5 green to put 7+1/+1 counters on target non-creature land you control. It becomes a 0/0 fungus with haste. It's still a land. So once you get to 7 mana, this thing becomes an absolute truck because it makes 7/7s every turn, which is really, really good, and you'll win the game very fast if you have that. But most of the game, it's just going to be a 2/2 for 2, which is fine. Like, if you're doing a bunch of rampy stuff, sure, but again, you kind of want your like, this is a good card in ramp decks, but I don't think ramp decks are like real actual decks that do things and are functional. The Skullspore Nexus. 6 green for a legendary artifact. This spell costs X less to cast, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. Whenever 1 or more non-token creatures you control die, create a green fungus dinosaur creature token with base power and toughness each equal to the total power of those creatures, and you can pay 2 and tap it to double target creature's power until end of turn. So this is like Great Henge inspired card, right? Like Great Henge. It's not as good as the Great Henge, so I'm going to be very clear. It is not as good as the Great Henge because it doesn't draw you a bunch of cards. But it makes a lot of huge guys. And, like, I don't know. Let's say this costs 4 mana, which is not, like, super unreasonable in green. And you play this on, like, turn 6, and you have the 2 mana activation up. It's kind of a nightmare to deal with. Like, your opponent's like, guess I'll just be taking 8 every turn then. And you just, whatever. So it's kind of a bit of a problem. So I actually do kind of like it. It is a good finisher. It does, help grind out games. It's good on defense, right? Your opponent's attacking into you, and you're like, well, I'll kill your thing, but then I just get another thing. And so it's pretty good. Thrashing Brontodon. 1 green for a 3/4 with the ability 1, sacrifice it to destroy target artifact or enchantment. You won't really want to discard. You won't really want to sacrifice your 3 mana 3/4 to destroy an artifact or enchantment. It's probably not an enormously great deal for you, but it's just nice. It's just an extra ability to have. So it's good when it comes up and you need it. Yeah, I don't know, just really solid. I mean, the one thing that's keeping this from tier 1 is that it is double pipped, so you're not going to get to play it on 3 every game. You only get to play with it on 3 like 70% of the time, which is a lot worse than just getting to play it on turn 3 all the time. Twists and Turns. Single green mana for enchantment. If a creature you would control would explore, instead scry when, then that creature explores. When Twists and Turns enter the battlefield, target creature you control explores. And when a land enters the battlefield under your control, if you control 7 or more lands, transform this. It transforms into a land that can tap for green mana, or it can play 3 and a green and tap. Look at the top 4 cards of your library, you may reveal a creature card from one of them, put it into your hand, and put the rest on the bottom of your library in random order. Yeah, I mean, I really like this card. Giving the first Explorer is really important. Like, making all your Explorer better is nice. You can eventually just get a bunch of value out of this late. So, I like it. Seems decent. Seems good to me. Like a really solid, like, flexible card that can do a decent amount of stuff for you. And finally, this is the last green card, Walk with the Ancestors. 4 and a green for a sorcery. Return up to 1 target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. Discover 4. I kind of like this card. I'm usually not big on this type of effect. I mean, but the thing is, you are getting something back, and you aren't losing like an enormous amount of tempo because you are discovering 4. The problem with Discover generally is like, what if I hit my like 2-drop? Discover actually makes 1-drops like a lot worse, just generally as a mechanic. It makes them worse to have in your deck because you want to be hitting like 2-drops and above. Like, so it really is actually like kind of like when you're playing with Discover cards, you need to be cognizant of the fact that like it's important to have a curve, but also like you do want to make sure your curve is slanted a little higher, just so these type of cards you can play. Because like getting any permanent card back is kind of nice. Maybe it's a little too overcosted and I should bump this down. Like, I'm honestly not going to be picking it that highly, just because it is a 5-mana spell, and 5-mana spells, you just can find better 5-mana spells. So, yeah. And that's it for this episode. Done with the green cards. Hopefully you enjoyed and learned some stuff about the cards I haven't played with yet and have no experience with and no actual real ideas as to how good they are, but it's fun to talk about and think about how good cards are without actually having played with them. And I'll see you next time.